welcome to STEaPP Chat. Last episode, Adam chatted about the interdisciplinary conference that he helped to organize in Thailand. Today, I catch up with him, Irina, and Laurent. I start by asking them to remind us what this conference is about.
It was a really, really good conference. It was the Transdisciplinary Engineering Conference, hosted out in Thailand, in Hua Hin, just down the coast from Bangkok. It's a really great crowd, about 100 or so, mostly kind of engineers who are looking at different ways of bringing in social science and businesses and other kinds of actors to sort of into their research.
In terms of the aims, so the conference is about transdisciplinary engineering, and it's hosted by the International Society of Transdisciplinary Engineering, or ISTE for short. And well, that was one of the talks of the conference. One of the panels was to discuss what we mean by transdisciplinary engineering and the aims of the society. So we're still discussing it, and I'm sure Irina and Adam will have a lot to say about that. But just to keep it very short, it's anything to do with the intersection of engineering and any other discipline or field. And it includes an element of practice as well. It's not just an academic conference, but very focused on, industry, which is very big in the case of engineering, but also policy, which is very close to our hearts.
And it's been, I don't know, maybe the third time I've been to this conference. I think the others, I don't know, it's like first or second time, is that right?
It was the first time for me.
And the second time for me.
Yeah, so it was, for me, there was a really great time. I was part of the program sort of management of the conference. So I had quite a lot of jobs to do. But I think one of the highlights for me was being able to introduce the Prime Minister the ex-Prime Minister, I should say, of Thailand to the stage, which was really, really interesting. He was a really interesting character, actually. He's apparently a Geordie. It's kind of interesting to have someone who's born in Newcastle, but also an ex-Prime Minister, sort of leader of a political party there. So that was one of my highlights.
Irina, can you describe your experience of attending the conference first time?
It was great. I thought it was a really interesting opportunity to attend an event that aligns very well with the vision for the BSc Science and Engineering for Social Change, because the whole idea of the program is to be transdisciplinary. So to have the opportunity to contribute to the education track at the conference and talk to others who are interested in these types of programs was really fruitful. So yeah, that was the highlight for me, I suppose, on a sort of networking level. I thought there were a lot of people in the room who have a real interest in developing similar programs, and also with whom we may choose to collaborate either research or teaching wise further down the line. So and it was really great to also see that the plan is to strengthen the education track of the conference. And yeah, I very much look forward to be part of that, if possible, in the next few years.
Other works to encourage more female joining the engineering are progressing. The profession itself is still considered mainly by male. How would you describe the gender representation in this conference?
I would say this conference was quite balanced from my perspective. So I can compare three types of conferences. So I've been to sort of traditional engineering conferences, which are male dominated in the field of mechanical and civil engineering in my case. Then I've been to engineering education conferences, which I'd say probably the balance leans a bit the other way around. But I thought this conference was quite balanced. And going back to the size, I think 120 people is really ideal, because you have an opportunity to have some real conversations and put faces to the names and reach out to people, which doesn't happen if the event is too big. So,
well, for me, I think what was so interesting was bringing some really great female leaders in the field. And this is kind of, I guess, just taking off from your last question. we had Cindy Atman, who's a professor out in the US, who's done some really amazing work around characterizing the design process in engineering. And what's so interesting from our perspective when looking at engineering in policy is about how similar that framework is to the process of policy design. And so now we've got this opportunity to take this framework that Cindy has developed and applied in lots of different kind of test situations as engineers go through design thinking, and bring it over to policy space and to collaborate internationally with Cindy on that, and to potentially reframe the way in which we understand policy and policymaking with that kind of engineering lens on top of it. And that on top of that, we've got also, I mean, local great sort of female women leadership in engineering with Claudia Eckert at Open University, who was there as well as a keynote speaker. And she gave such tremendous insight into the ways in which engineering practice happens in reality, as opposed to how we might conceptualize it or teach it, I suppose, or think about it abstractly. And both of those kinds of contacts we're going to take forward and to look at creating new research programs. And of course, I can't not mention the fact that I'll be the conference chair for the conference next year in UCL East, and working with Irina and Laurent, hopefully, and the crew over at the Centre for Engineering Education, John Mitchell, Helen Mandari over there to put on a great show over at UCL East.
Laurent, I know you're super busy right now to finalize your PhD thesis. What is your main takeaway from the conference?
I think it was really good to get some input on our work. So I presented a paper which is a framework derived from the research I've done the last 3 years. So it was quite interesting to see what non-UK based practitioners and academics had to say about it, and maybe how I could, reflecting on that, maybe how I could frame it a bit better for people who don't necessarily know the inner workings of the British civil service. Because I think a lot of the points that I made were very specific to that context. So that's definitely a point to take away. Otherwise, I really, really enjoyed being able to talk to people who work and live in other countries. I think it's always the highlight of those international conferences. And this year it was held in Thailand, so we had a lot of people coming from all over Asia, which is a very different culture from Europe and even the US. And on top of that, a very different style of governance, which varies across countries in Asia. But we had some really interesting talks, for instance, with people from Japan. So that was really valuable, as well as meeting, other young scholars, which when you're a PhD is always really interesting.
Irina, following on the point about meeting other like-minded scholars and practitioners in the conference, during the pandemic, we have to do all the meetings and conferences online. How do you find now returning to the in-person format?
I think that the connections you form when you're there in person are much deeper, because we've all been in online conferences where, when there's the coffee break, you go and you do something else, or there's a talk and you very easily switch off and you start doing some emails in the same time. And 5 minutes later, you realize you haven't been listening and you don't know what's on. So it's really great to be able to have that space to just immerse in what is happening at the conference. And, the academic sessions are great, but we shouldn't underestimate the value of the social events as well. And I think that's something that they really excelled at in Thailand. There was such a good mix of cultural visits and breaks throughout the day, sort of for lunch, coffee, dinner. So giving people those opportunities to meet informally as well, and to explore opportunities for collaboration, as Adam was saying earlier, or the discussions that Laurent mentioned. And I think that's where you really bond, and that it's much more likely that you'll actually put in a proposal together with those people than if you just hear their talk and then you go back to your normal routine. And obviously it's a lovely place to visit, so it's interesting on a personal level as well. and that adds to the excitement, I suppose.
Talking about social interaction in the conference, any highlights?
I really enjoyed the cultural elements. So they on the last night they brought some traditional dancers in. I really enjoyed that mini show ahead of dinner. I think it was a great way of just dipping into the culture a little bit. And the other thing that I'd say I enjoyed a lot is that the atmosphere was very friendly and supportive. So there was no sort of sense of I don't know, competing, or that sense of, oh, my work is like this and your work is like that. Everybody was trying to give each other real supportive advice and trying to sort of take each other's work forward, and it's really great to have constructive input like that.
I understand karaoke is very popular in Asia. Did anyone try it?
Yeah, I'm a pretty shy guy. I don't like to grab the mic and get up on the stage and sing my way with my colleague Pursuit. No, it was great fun. I mean, Pursuit Kumsap, who was the conference chair, was an amazing host for the whole event, and he put on that great show with the local dancers, and then we ran a great sort of karaoke session where I think quite a lot of the crowd got up on stage at various points, and I was there once or twice, as I think Irina and Laurent were. Definitely. So creating our own little band, I think, maybe for next year.
But I would add to that. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, Irina. I was just saying it was great fun.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's going to be a really tough act to follow for next year, I think. It's sort of striking that balance between the sort of technical or scientific content and then doing something really cool in the after hours.
Last time we chat about the newly developed research lab in the department, the Engineering Policy Group. Any update on it?
Yeah, well, we're just keeping our fingers crossed a little bit at the moment. We've got a big bid that we're waiting to hear on from the ESRC. It went through the first phase of review, got very high scores, really nice feedback, and we're just waiting this week, hopefully, to get a positive result from that. That would allow us to carry on the work that Laurent has been doing. It was based in the Energy Ministry, and start to translate that across to the transport sector, and to look at the Transport Ministry and one of its delivery bodies and the relationship of engineering advice in the UK government and out into Parliament as well, a little bit. So we're kind of hopeful that grant's going to come through. So that's pretty exciting. And I suppose as well, of course, with the advent of the BSc that Irina is leading on, that also starts to provide a bit of a foundation for a new cohort of like-minded students coming through that can also provide that kind of broader culture and space for the lab to grow.
Isn't it great that undergraduate students can be part of this community and develop their research interest in it?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I can hand over to Irina to talk about the degree, but it's, from my mind, it's very much about the way in which engineering plays a role within policy, and the way with which policy and the ways of doing policy can play a role in shaping and configuring engineering as a mechanism of getting change.
Absolutely, there will be opportunities for the students to engage either formally or informally, depending on the avenues that we manage to establish. But that's the hope, to create some critical mass in that space.
And tying everything together, it'll be great, because as we're hosting the next Transdisciplinary Engineering Conference next year at UCL East, it'll be a great way to involve the new cohort as well.
That's right. And I've expressly framed it as the theme being engineering for social change. So to really kind of drive home that connection. Yeah,
absolutely. And that would be one of my goals. I hope that we will be able to bring undergraduate students into the landscape, because usually with conferences is either staff or PhD students, but not so much masters or undergraduate students. So I'd hope we can do some workshop or some other activities for the students and with the students, as Laurent was saying.
I had a final point. It's linked to what Irina was saying earlier. I think the best thing about the conference, or in terms of how I felt about the conference, is that the people there are transdisciplinary, not necessarily in what they do, but at least how they think. They're very open to bringing insights that are not from their discipline, whether it's engineering or something else, into their thinking to, build something better, and try to, put more good out there. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd follow that up. I mean, the offer that I'm trying to build for the conference coming next year is to get, obviously, the engineering faculty members engaged in that, but also the broader social science and practice communities that UCL connects with. So that includes, obviously, colleagues from STS, as well as the Institute of Education, and the kind of broader sociology, psychology colleagues right across, so that we're really, I mean, UCL is a transdisciplinary institution in many respects. Just it has this kind of natural leaning in that way, and so this, in a sense, we could see the conference as almost like coming home, and so yeah, I'm really keen to get the wider community engaged in that and excited by it.
Here, I hope you enjoy listening to our chat about the Interdisciplinary Engineering Conference 2023 in Thailand, and all the other ongoing work in the Department of Science, Technology, Engineering and Public Policy. Information to connect with Adam, Irina and Laurent through social media is at the end of this video. Until the next episode, please look after yourself and stay curious.